ever feel like there's got to be more to life, than just like the daily grind? Like maybe, just maybe, escaping the 9 to 5 isn't some crazy, impossible dream.
It's a fantasy a lot of people share.
It really is. So today we're going to dive into Timothy Ferriss's The 4-Hour Workweek to see if he's actually onto something.
And what's fascinating about this book is how many people it really resonated with. It's not just about like getting rich. It's this idea of, taking back your time,
Yeah.
freedom to design a life, I don't know, on your own terms.
Yeah. And the thing about Ferriss is he's not just some like guru preaching from a mountaintop. This guy is an athlete, entrepreneur, author. He actually walks the walk. He's used these principles to build a pretty unconventional life, and a very successful one at that.
Right from the get-go, he throws out this really bold statement. Everything popular is wrong.
Ooh, I like that.
Which, might sound a bit extreme, but he does back it up. With some pretty compelling examples, I have to admit.
Like how he won the Chinese kickboxing national championships.
Right.
And no, this wasn't some fluke, right? Like he noticed everyone was training the same way, so he just did the complete opposite.
Yeah.
He focused all his energy on pushing people OT of the ring, which totally legal, by the way.
Totally. It's a great example of, question your assumptions. Instead of just, like, following the crowd blindly, Ferriss took a step back, analyzed the rules, and he found this unusual strategy. And it worked.
It's kind of brilliant.
Yeah.
And he uses that same question everything approach when it comes to, well, income. He has this idea of relative income, which really changes how we usually think about wealth.
Because most of us, we get stuck on absolute income, that big, impressive number on your paycheck. But Ferriss, he's saying that, actually. Time is our most valuable asset. So relative income, it factors in how many hours you're working to earn those dollars.
So someone making, say, $50,000 a year, but they're only working 10 hours a week.
Exactly.
Their relative income is going to be way higher. And honestly, they probably have a richer life than someone who's like slaving away for 80 hours a week to make $100,000.
It's such a good point. It's all about perspective. And, to really make this point, Ferriss, he shares stories about people who've actually embraced this whole unconventional approach. Like, there's this guy, Hans Saul, lawyer, right?
Yeah.
Ditched the courtroom for, get this, a surf company in Brazil.
Okay, now that's the dream. But for most people, I'm guessing, taking that kind of leap is, terrifying.
Oh, absolutely. And Ferriss knows that. That's why he spends a good chunk of the book talking about fear. He says, instead of running from it, you got to confront it head on. And he has this fear-setting exercise.
Okay, so what's that involve? Do I need to, like, buy a self-help workbook and stock up on scented candles?
It's funny you say that. It's actually the opposite. It's about getting really real, like even a little dark with yourself. You actually sit down and you write out the absolute worst-case scenario for the thing you're most afraid of. So what's the worst that could happen if you quit that job, started that business, or, booked that one-way ticket?
So, like, if I decided to follow Hans's lead and ditch podcasting to become, I don't know, a surfing instructor.
Let's say you do. What's the worst thing that could happen? Maybe the lessons don't work out, you miss podcasting, you have to move back in with your parents.
Okay, not ideal. But I guess what you're saying is by actually confronting that fear, by writing it down, really thinking it through.
Often you'll realize even that worst-case scenario, it's not insurmountable. And even better, you can start to think about ways to, reduce those risks.
So it's about being prepared.
Exactly.
Ferriss also talks about this guy, Jean-Marc, who ends up living off mush in Ghana after a business decision goes wrong. Not exactly the glamorous life he was picturing.
But here's the thing with Jean-Marc, right? He actually finds this unexpected joy in, well, the simplicity of it all. Even though he felt like he'd failed, he realized he was going to be okay. It totally changed his outlook.
It's all about perspective.
Exactly.
So we've faced our fears, we're ready for a change, but how do we even start to figure out what we want? It's easy to say, I want to travel the world or be my own boss, but then what?
It can feel really overwhelming, right?
It totally does.
That's where Ferriss brings in his dreamline exercise.
Yeah.
Instead of just having these, like, vague ideas, you're going to define some concrete goals for the next 6 and 12 months. And he even says, break it down into categories: being, having, and doing.
Okay, so being would be stuff like, I want to be a happier person, healthier. Having would be like, I don't know, that beachfront property.
Right.
And then doing could be anything. Learning to surf, finally writing that novel I've been putting off.
Exactly. You're turning those, daydreams into actual concrete goals. And to make it even more real, he has you calculate the target monthly income. the TMI, what you'd need to support each dream.
So if I want to, say, live in Bali for a year and learn to play the game, Lynn, how much would that actually cost?
You'd be surprised. Ferriss gives examples of people finding crazy good deals on housing, food, the whole 9 yards, especially in countries where the cost of living is lower. Suddenly, those dreams become a lot more, attainable.
It's like you said earlier, it's all about perspective and
Yeah,
challenging those assumptions, right? Like what things should cost.
exactly.
And speaking of challenging assumptions, didn't Ferriss get a bunch of students at Princeton to cold email CEOs?
That's right. He challenged them to contact some of the most, unreachable people out there. I think one was even the CEO of Google, to prove that even these, crazy goals, they're often closer than you think. And you know what? It worked. A bunch of them actually got meetings, had conversations with these people they admired.
I love that.
Pretty amazing.
Okay, I'm feeling inspired. But let's talk about the actual doing part. We've faced our fears, defined our dream life, figured out the costs, but how do we actually escape the 9 to 5 and make it all happen?
That's where Ferriss's DEAL framework comes in. It stands for definition, elimination, automation, liberation.
Okay, I'm listening.
So we've already done the D part, defining our ideal lifestyle. So now it's about eliminating the non-essential.
So cutting out unnecessary tasks, those pointless meetings that could have been an email, any commitments that don't really fit with our goals.
Exactly. Ruthless prioritization.
Yep.
Ferriss even suggests limiting yourself to just two, mission-critical things on your to-do list each day.
Wow, only 2.
Yeah, focus is key. But then I guess the question is, how's that different for someone who's employed versus, an entrepreneur?
Because if you're still tied to a traditional job, you need more freedom and flexibility before you can even think about automating your income.
Exactly. Otherwise, you're just going to end up with more work piled on, even with automation. But whether you're an employee or an entrepreneur, the big goal, the ultimate goal, is to create a muse.
Oh, yes, the muse. That beautiful, self-sustaining source of income that lets us say goodbye to the daily grind and live the dream. But what does a muse actually look like? In real life, does the book give any examples?
It does. One of my favorites is this guy, Doug. He made this whole online business selling sound effects.
Sound effects.
Yeah, and he automated the entire thing, like orders, payments. It all runs even while he's sleeping.
Okay, that's impressive. But building a muse takes time. Right, and in the meantime, most of us are still stuck with our current workloads. How do we manage all of that while we're, building our dream life on the side?
That's where eliminating distractions becomes absolutely crucial. And Ferriss has some pretty radical ideas about this. He's a big advocate for what he calls a low-information diet.
Wait, he doesn't consume any news.
He's very, very selective about the information he takes in. He says most news is just, negative, it's repetitive, and it's not actually helpful in, achieving your goals. So instead of getting sucked into that constant stream of information overload, he focuses on stuff that's directly related to his work, his interests.
So it's not about becoming like a hermit living under a rock. It's about choosing where you focus your attention, your energy.
Exactly. It's about reclaiming your time and mental space. You don't want to fall into those information black holes.
And on a more practical level, Ferriss is big on batching tasks and optimizing your workflow, right?
Oh, absolutely. He's all about maximizing efficiency, whether it's using techniques to read faster, automating email responses, or just delegating tasks that other people can do. Which, speaking of delegation,
Ferriss is the king of outsourcing. He's always talking about his virtual assistants, his VAs who handle everything. Scheduling, emails, you name it.
he even uses his VAs to communicate with his wife when he's traveling.
No way. Tell me he at least wrote his own wedding vows.
He jokes about having his VA send apology notes to his wife. But seriously, outsourcing can be a game changer. It frees up so much time and mental energy, especially for stuff that doesn't require your specific skills.
But hiring a VA sounds like, I don't know, something only rich entrepreneurs can afford.
That's a common misconception. Ferriss talks about how there are tons of affordable options, even for people who are just starting out. He recommends checking out services specifically for smaller businesses, or even looking at VA firms based in countries with lower costs of living.
So you could have a virtual assistant handling your schedule, booking your flights, answering your emails, all while you're, learning to surf in Bali.
It's totally doable. But just like with any delegation strategy, clear communication is key. You got to set realistic expectations and have backup systems in place.
So you're not left stranded if something goes wrong. Makes sense. But even with all this talk of automation, delegation, generating income, there's still this big question, what about the, I don't know, the emotional and psychological challenges of actually escaping the 9 to 5?
It's true. Ditching the traditional career path, it's not always easy. Ferriss talks about how a lot of people feel this sense of, like, disorientation, maybe even boredom once they have the freedom they've always wanted.
You're like, okay, I'm finally here. Now what?
It's like you're so busy trying to get off the treadmill, you don't know what to do once you actually step off.
It's true. So how do you avoid that? How do you find meaning, real purpose in this new life, this freedom you've created?
Well, Ferriss, he talks about how that initial excitement, that high of ditching the 9 to 5,
Yeah.
it can wear off, especially if you haven't really defined what matters to you. He says it's not about finding, like, the meaning of life. It's about creating meaning.
So it's not enough to just quit your job and move to an island. You need something that, gives you a reason to get out of bed in the morning, even if that bed on a beach somewhere.
Exactly. And, for a lot of people, that sense of purpose comes from service. Remember how we talked about Ferriss's thing about defining your dreams, like being, having, doing? He says adding service to that doing list, that can be incredibly fulfilling.
It's like volunteering, mentoring someone, even starting a nonprofit, or just, I don't know, using your skills to make a difference somehow. Service can be that thing that, fills the void.
It's about connecting with something bigger than yourself.
Right.
Using that freedom to, have a positive impact.
And this is where it all kind of comes together, right? Remember that question Ferriss asks at the end of the book? What would you do if there were no way you could fail? It really makes you think. It's like he's forcing you to face your fears, to push past those limits you set for yourself, and just imagine. What would you do if you knew for sure that you couldn't fail?
Think about it. If failure wasn't even a possibility, what amazing things would you go after? What would you create? What kind of change would you make?
We get in our own way so much,
Yeah.
It's fear, it's doubt, it's what we think we're supposed to do. But if we can take these ideas from the 4-hour work week, we can break free from all that.
Yeah.
We can build a life that truly fits who we are, what we care about.
So as you're thinking about all this, we have a little challenge for you.
Oh, I like challenges.
Take one fear-setting exercise from the book. Just one. Get a piece of paper and actually write down the absolute worst-case scenario for that dream you've been putting off. You might be surprised what you realize,
Exactly. What's the worst that could happen?
Right.
We hope this deep dive has left you feeling inspired, maybe even a little rebellious, like you're ready to shake things up.
Because you don't have to wait for retirement to start living a life you love.
Take that first step.
Challenge those beliefs that are holding you back.
Start building the life you were meant to live.
Who knows? Maybe we'll run into you on a beach in Bali someday.
And that's our deep dive on the 4-hour work week. We'll catch you next time when we explore who knows what. Until then, keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep living life on your own terms.